What's up, everyone? It's Susan. Today is the beginning of a new series, Creating Space for Differences, Culture, Faith, and Religion. I wanted to do this series because I just wanted to highlight the importance of creating room for different opinions, different cultures, different perspectives, and I'm looking forward to just having these conversations and sharing them. Today is going to be the first episode of the series. This conversation is going to be a little bit different in the beginning, at least. Varsha is my friend from school, and we're going to just talk a little bit about research and some science, and her research is a little bit different than mine. As many of you know, I completed my master's degree, which was a thesis track, so my research was focused on Duchenne muscular dystrophy and looking at the cardiovascular and respiratory effects. So some of the same skills. So she's going to share a little bit about her experience and then some other things we're going to get into. So looking forward to it.
And also try to get 100% from the experience. Like, example, I met you in our first year. Let's say if I didn't talk to you, I wouldn't have a friend now, right? So I think being open, being humble, and also like learning the best of any experience is, I think, absolutely what I think the big picture is.
What's up, fam? Welcome back to Big Picture Podcast, where we discuss faith, testimonies, and perspective while focusing on the big picture. I am your host, Susan Obi. Happy Wednesday, and we are back for another episode. I post these every other Wednesday, so I'm excited for today's conversation. I've loved all of our conversations and just want to hear y'all's feedback. If you have enjoyed the episodes for this year, go ahead and leave a rating or review, whichever one or both, and just let me know your thoughts. I just really like hearing what y'all think about the conversations. But for today's episode, so I have my friend Varsha on here with me. So Varsha is one of my close friends from graduate school. So y'all know that I finished my master's at University of Missouri, and Varsha and I were in the same program. We started the same year, same semester, and just became pretty close. So I just wanted to have her on the podcast to just kind of share her experience so far of moving from India. So Varsha is originally from India, so moved here to start her Ph.D. and start her doctorate program. So just kind of want to talk a little bit about her experiences. And Varsha is also someone who I just have really good conversations with. So when I knew I wanted to start the podcast, I was like, yeah, I definitely have to have her on here. So I'm just excited for y'all to hear her story. So Varsha.
Hey, Susan, how are you? As Susan was saying, I'm Varsha. I'm from India, and I'm an international student on that. And I'm doing my doctoral studies in pharmacology, and I'm almost about to be done. So I'm here to do my PhD, and I'm trying to get into research afterwards, after I finish my PhD as well. I am not certain about where exactly, but I know I do want to pursue research after this, like on the same lines. I work on cancer, drug resistance, and how to combat that. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, that's pretty important stuff. So you did your master's before your PhD, right?
That's right, yeah. So I did my master's from India. So I did it from like a central institute or a federal institute there. And I actually was an engineer before I came here, and now I'm in School of Medicine, as you might have guessed. So it's a little bit of a change for me, but I mean, I've been loving it, so.
Okay, so take us back to the beginning. Can you talk a little bit about your experience living in India, and then after finishing high school and college, kind of thinking about your goals? Like, what was your train of thought for where you saw yourself after you finished high school and college?
Yeah, sure, definitely. So I think I kind of pretty much knew from my high school onwards that I wanted to do something with research and biology. And so my choices there were very straightforward. It wasn't very hard to make a decision at that point for me. And I think my I have to mention my parents who are really supportive of me to take anything that I want to, which might not be the case for a lot of people back in India. I stayed with my family till high school, and then I wanted to do my bachelor's degree in biotechnology, closely related to biology, engineering, and research. So I had to move out of my home for the first time. I have to admit it was nervous, and I was like, oh God, I was going through an emotional turmoil for a week. But then I think I got like some of my best friends till date there. I stayed in a hostel. Then I did engineering for 4 years. And then by the end of that, I knew for certain that I didn't want to go for a job. I wanted to pursue more like higher studies. And then I went on to master's, I had already mentioned. So that was a little bit of a switch again, because I had to travel farther away from home. I would say it's like traveling from probably New York to California. That distance probably, or in terms of time, I would say that was again a very enriching experience, because I knew I could handle myself on my own first. Second, that I'm really passionate about research, and that's when I realized I can do a doctoral study and PhD. And I was like, maybe I should think about opportunities outside of India. I think one thing that made me make the choice of going out is like to experience different culture, to see how other people think of science, for example. And also, I mean, knowing that a lot of countries have this international exposure itself is very, interesting. So, and then here I am to do my PhD.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit about, so where exactly in India did you grow up?
Yeah. So I am from the southernmost state called Tamil Nadu. So it's like a heavily seaside state. So we do have like multiple states like how we have here in the US. And I'm from a city called Chennai, which is like highly cosmopolitan. So you get to meet a lot of people. You have a lot of cultural aspects from different parts of India and from the world, in fact. And there's also a lot of food from different parts of the culture. And I think that's what is exciting, because you get all this exposure when you're like growing up. And that also helps you in making a decision later on in life, because you can handle that much of exposure and how to respond to it, being from one part of India. So that's where I grew up primarily. And then for my bachelor's degree, I went a little bit away from home. So it's in the same state, but it's a different city called Tanjore. That's where I did my bachelor's or like engineering degree for 4 years. And from there on, it's always been away from home. So I went farther away for my master's, which was in a northwest part of India called Rajasthan. So that's a little bit of a traveling distance. It takes quite some time to get by a train or like flights, in fact. So, and then from there, I'm here to another country in the world. So that's been the journey.
You said that your research is concerning cancer therapy. So can you talk a little bit more about that and where you're at in that project? So you're finishing your doctorate in December. So you're getting pretty close to wrapping up the project. So can you share a little bit about the progress so far with that?
Yeah, sure. So, as I mentioned, actually, I've been working on cancer or cancer-related research questions from my master's, which was actually what drove me to this particular school, as well as my professor or the research question which I'm addressing in my PhD right now. So I am focusing on a cancer called non-small cell lung cancer, and it is one of the two types of lung cancer that's been shown to be more prevalent in the humans, right? And the deal with this cancer is that it gets harder to treat the more you treat it, which sounds a little bit paradoxical, but that's how it is. The thing is, the current therapeutics actually act on the patients or help the patients so long they don't. From when they don't, it just gets like really worse and down the drain. So the current therapeutics actually work really great for these patients, but there's a point when they stop responding to it. And when researchers looked into it, it seems that the cancer cells have developed a mechanism to stop responding to these therapeutics and rather become more aggressive in nature, which is definitely not good for like in a clinical perspective, right? So we are trying to address something in the lines of this question, that why do cancer cells become resistant to the current therapeutics? And we are not talking about any therapeutics in general. We are talking about something called targeted therapeutics. As the name suggests, they target a particular molecular pattern or a molecular target in a cell. But unfortunately, a lot of these patients become resistant after 14 to 16 months of treatment, which is quite early, I would say. And then they stop responding to anything at all. And then it gets really worse from there. In my study, what I'm trying to do is find cellular targets or cellular proteins that are expressed by these cancer cells that become resistant to the particular drug that we have in question. So we have identified some of the targets that we think could help in combating this resistance problem and probably prevent it in the future. So this is a little bit about project one. The second one is like totally different from this, which is exciting, obviously. As a researcher, you want to work on multiple things, right? So that relates to another disease problem called diabetic retinopathy. It affects usually adults who have been diabetic for a long time who don't have a proper control over their diabetes. So there are good therapeutics again for this particular problem, but the question or the problem that we are trying to address is most of these patients do not go for their annual eye exams. And I think we know a lot of people in our close circle who are diabetic who don't get these regular eye exams, right? So it could be a lot of things. It's first of all, to start with, it's inconvenient. You need to get to a testing center, screening center to get it done, and they would dilate your eyes, and then you have to sit and then get your eyes screened. And you have to do this every year, so it's not a joke. And in case of countries which are still developing or underdeveloped, this gets a little more complicated than that. So you don't have access to these facilities as easily as you would in a developed nation. And second of all, it's quite expensive. And insurance policies in developing or underdeveloped countries is a little bit of a question. Or even if you have an insurance, like, can you spend further on it to get an eye test done? All these amounts to the problem of people not getting an eye exam on time. And this can be very threatening to their condition because as the symptoms start to appear, then they approach a doctor, but there's enough damage done already, which is irreversible. So in my research, we are trying to develop a screening assay that can be used at their home at ease, which is convenient, cost effective, and they can screen themselves for this particular condition. So you're trying to do a preventative strategy as well as you're trying to help the people who are already having some signs of diabetic retinopathy to monitor the progression. These are like two broad research projects that I've been working on since year one.
Yeah, so both of those are really, really interesting. And then as far as the diabetic retinopathy, I think that's really cool because especially like being able to have the screening at home, so that's more convenient for people. And yeah, a lot of diabetics for sure, well, what I've run into, like, don't really go to their yearly screening exams. And obviously not everyone who's diabetic will have diabetic retinopathy, but it's definitely a huge risk factor. As far as what's going to be in your dissertation, have you decided which project, or do you think you're going to try to talk about both?
My initial plan was to talk about both, but it would be a little more complex to put both into one thesis, right? So I'm kind of leaning towards the diabetic retinopathy project because we have worked closely with patient samples and it has huge implications on the society sooner than the other project that I'm working on. I mean, both have like amazing implications. I'm not going to disagree on that. But it's just like something is a little more closer to your heart. And I think probably this is a little more closer to my heart. But I still need to make the call. I think I have about 2 to 3 months to do that. So, I mean, both have progressed enough that I can make a thesis out of individual projects. So it's just a choice right now.
So as far as patients who have diabetic retinopathy, would you say that people who are maybe lack health literacy or in other countries where they don't really have access to healthcare, would you say that they're at higher risk for having the damage in the blood vessels?
Yeah, definitely, right? As you said, you're right. So under developing countries, you don't have enough information about these things at times. There might be information, but you still may not have the access to it, or you may not have the money to do it. So on the whole, this research is not like focused towards one group of people. It's to help anyone who has diabetes across the world, no matter how is their financial status or how is their accessibility to healthcare is. And I think that is really important for a lot of other diseases, especially the lifestyle diseases, right? Even blood pressure for that matter. Like, I think maybe 20, 30 years ago, blood pressure was a huge problem. Like, a lot of people leave it unnoticed and they might have increased chances of stroke and heart attacks and all that. But now it's reduced because of how much information is going around and how much accessibility to healthcare or inexpensive healthcare has become. So I think we should get to the point that at least we are able to address these small challenges and make lives of people easier, rather than focusing on like only like the huge diseases or like something that you need extensive treatment for. This is as easy as preventative. It's nothing fascinating. It's just like you can help them, screen themselves. That's it, right? So making lives easier is, I think, what healthcare should focus on as well.
Yeah. Definitely. That's really cool. Interesting research. So I want to talk a little bit about your experience when you first moved here to the United States. So you moved from Talamud. Is that how you say it?
Tamil Nadu.
Yeah. Tamil Nadu.
Yes.
To Rajasthan.
Yes.
And then to Missouri. So what was your experience like when you first got here? So this was 2019, right? Because that's when I started. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what was that like for you? I
think, it might be surprising to say that I didn't have like huge change in my life, which sounds really like weird to me as I'm saying it. But that's how it was. I think it's just because of how welcoming the people in the department or like friends around were. I didn't feel like I moved to a different country. Oh my God, and how am I going to handle the stress? It was actually pretty chill. At first, I think I still remember the day I left India. I was like pretty nervous. I'm like, how am I going to handle it in a different country? I have to take care of everything on my own, which is not the case when you're like, not in my master's and my bachelor's. At least food was taken care of. We had dining halls. And like right now I have to live on my own. I have to cook for myself. I have to do the research, come back home. It's all up to you, and you have to also like start making money to take care of all these things. So that was a little bit tricky to start with, but I think it ended up being really amazing because you become independent and you know to handle a lot of situations on your own, and you also make friends from different parts of the world, and I think that in itself is pretty exciting. And the point of coming to a new country, you want to meet other people. And challenges, really, I still cannot think about many challenges that I've had here. Probably food, I think, because I am a vegetarian, as you might know already. So I think I found a little harder to like see what suits my, like food choices. But then I think I learned over time where I can get what. So I think that's also a part of learning that you need to do. You need to be able to adapt wherever you go. It can be here, it can be UK, or it can be any part of the world. You should be able to adapt to that culture and to that food availability. So I think it hasn't been a huge change, but it has been quite a change. I haven't like visited my country in years since I did I did it early this year. So being away from family is definitely challenging, and you know that you can't just meet them when you want, because it's a huge process to get there and to come back. So that's something quite challenging. And I think here being by yourself all alone is also quite challenging sometimes, because you need to, during COVID, for example, we had to all be indoors for a long time. And if you were affected by COVID, you had to take care of yourself, but not also come out, like quarantine yourself. So how do you do it? But I think we all did great. I think we all like pushed through and we learned it the hard way, but we did. So when we first met and just, became friends, it just seemed like it was very easy for you to adapt. It wasn't like, oh, she's in a new place, she doesn't know what's going on. So why do you think that is? Because I had like a lot of friends that are international students, and I don't know, everyone's different. Some people, it's like, yeah, it seems like they're adapting pretty well. Some people, it's kind of like,
they're still, you can tell they're still trying to learn the culture and get used to things. So why do you feel like your experience was very smooth moving into the US?
I think part of that started with my experience in India. Because I told you already how much I've traveled for my bachelor's or master's. And I think in India, if you move every 100 miles, you would find a new addition to culture, or perhaps a new culture itself, right? You have a lot of these micro cultures within a country. And you're not completely different, but you are a little different in say in the sense of language. For example, language is very important for communication, but if I move out of my state, it's a completely new language, it's a completely new food. So I think my adaptation is a very stepwise process that has happened over years. Like, I think moving out of my comfort zone at home to another city and being in a hostel, like adapting to whatever is available to eat or to be with. There was no fancy like washers and dryers back then. We used to wash our clothes with hands. So all the small adaptations that I did over years helped me when I moved here. I didn't feel like, oh my god, I have to do so much on my own, or I'm like totally into a new culture. And in fact, I think what made it easier is most people speak English. But in India, it's not so. If you move to another state, they speak a completely different language that's not English. So, of course, a lot of people do speak English, but it's not the same as talking in their mother tongue or language, right?
That's what I was going to ask. So, not everyone in India speaks English.
I think right now with years, a lot of people do. But, of course, there are a lot of people who don't as well, because you have regional languages that are enough. And for example, like Hindi, which most of other non-Indians know. It's one of the few official languages in India. And a lot of people actually speak dialects of Hindi. So they can understand each other with that. So I would say it's like half and half. So a lot of people do speak English, but they also have a different connecting language. So it's not like a hardcore mandatory language that everyone knows of. And of course, it comes with literacy and education and all that as well, right? So English becomes your mode of instruction or education. So I think that's what it is.
Wow, that's really cool that you were able to just adapt so easily. But what I'm sure there are some differences in culture and lifestyle in India and the US. So can you talk a little bit about some of those differences that you noticed?
Yeah, I think moving out of home early, that's a big difference, because most of Indians live with their parents. I think like till at least, like in my case, I live with my parents till high school, but most of the children can live with their parents till they go to work or they get married. And even after marriage, in a lot of families, the girls move to the guy's home with the parents. So it's very cultural to live with your family there. It's not like you need to move out. There's no question of moving out if you don't want to. Only I think recently people have started migrating to different parts of the country or the world for work or like education related situation. But I think that was a huge difference that I think most of us noticed as internationals, is like moving out of your home early, or like being independent for that matter. You make money. Like I see a lot of undergraduate students who work part-time in different places, and then they also go to classes. I sometimes wonder how they do both, because it was not so much in our country back. Like it was a little more affordable, of course, the education, but also like I don't see a lot of people doing part-time jobs to do that. Their parents would support, most likely. So that's, I think, one of the major differences that I noticed. I think apart from that, I think I'm highlighting food again and again because I'm a huge foodie.
Me too.
Yeah. So I think here the good part is you get all types of choices, all types of food from different parts of the world. And I think finding food is easier. Especially if you're in a bigger city, I think you have more options. You have, in fact, better options than anywhere in the world. You can taste a Japanese food if you want to. You can have Mexican if you want to. So that's not, it's slowly developing in like back home. But I think because there's been a lot of international population here, it's more prevalent, which is exciting. I love food.
Yeah. So this is random, but kind of having to do with food. So I've heard a lot of international students say that America doesn't have like their staple food. So if you think about different countries, so like Nigeria, jollof rice, pounded yam, things like that. And then India, I'm sure their staple foods, curry, rice, things like that. So when you came here, what would you consider American food? Just curious what your thoughts are on that.
That's a hard question. I think I would say burger. I don't know if it's right, but I'm just gonna say burger and maybe fries. But I mean, I'm sure they are not exactly from here. I would say there's a huge craze for like even steak.
Okay.
Right? That's something that I noticed like off the grid because it's not so much back in India. So I would think maybe that's what American food is. But
Okay.
I mean, you can tell me. What do you think?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I don't have an answer to that question. I think like you said, like it's kind of easier to find food in America just because there's so many different cuisines that you can find. So Indian, Mexican, Asian dishes, things like that. So I feel like every food though originated, if you really think back, from like a specific place or country and then is like brought to the United States just because the US is considered a melting pot. So anyways, just
Which
wanted
is, isn't it like interesting because, like you can get to taste, the US version of that food. And I
Yeah.
think most of us don't even, I mean, at least for me, I don't know the real version of many of these dishes, but I totally enjoy it. I love to indulge in all of this. So
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Another thing that you said that I wanted to ask about.
Yeah.
So you recently went to India to visit your family, and you talked about how like it's just a huge process coming here and then like wanting to go back to visit and then coming back. Can you talk a little bit about what that process is? Maybe not a lot of people understand what it means to be an international student and the process it takes to come here, and then certain stipulations that you have with if you want to go back to your country or a different country and then come back to the United States. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I mean, we usually get our visa stamped when we come here, which is like same for anybody who's visiting another country as well. You have visas in place. So what you do is you need to, of course, contact your international center before you visit. You need to ask them like for a signature that says that, yeah, here you go. You can go travel for the next 6 months without any issues. And then when you're going home, it's all like a smooth sail. There's no issue because you have an immigration there as well. They will just look at your passport, your visa, and let you inside your own home country. When you're coming back again, there's an immigration there. And when you come back to the States, there is an immigration here as well. But I think getting information about, for example, applying to the current visa or applying visa to your parents, that's a little tricky because you need to do some ground research for that. And it's very important because some of these take probably 365 days to get access to, or like there's a waiting time of 360, especially for Indians. The wait time is huge because a lot of people visit the US. So that means they also need time to process all of these visas as it comes. So I think planning ahead of your travel is the important key, is the most important key. You can book your tickets last moment, doesn't matter. But you need to know when you're traveling, how you're coming back. And if you're traveling through other European countries, more than one or two, I think there's some other regulations for that. You need to get a travel visa for that particular country which you're visiting. It's a little complicated, but it varies case to case. If you do a little bit of homework before your travel, I think you should be fine. Everything is available on internet. I cannot like generalize that this is the process because it's so varied for each person. I mean, I know people from the same country, same degree have different years of visa. So they have to renew it. I think the most important document for a student is something called I-20, which is the legal document to stay here in the US. That's something you have to always think about. Like all these small things you have to keep in mind. Your passport is valid, your visa is valid, because you want to travel and come back, not get stuck. So yeah,
that's just something I learned when I came here and made a lot of friends that were international students. And then of course my parents had to do some form of that. My dad, like when he came here and then started school, and had to do all those things. So it's things I knew about but became more familiar with as I had friends that were coming in from different countries. So just wanted you to touch a little bit on that, just because as an American being born and raised here, I just don't ever think of anything like that. So yeah, so a lot of adjustments coming here, but very smooth sailing for you, which is really awesome. So as far as thinking about what you want to do when you finish your PhD this year. What are some thoughts that you've had on what the future holds?
So, I mean, I've been considering multiple things. I think as you progress ahead in your degree, you get like a little more open to actually putting more sense into what a researcher is, right? So far, we've been thinking, okay, let's all study, I mean, work in a lab, get something done, and then, get your PhD degree. But it's not the same after you graduate. It's like a whole new world that's open to you. One thing I've realized is you don't have to make a career choice based just on your major or degree. You can always pursue something that is closely related or like even remotely related to what you're working on. For me as a PhD student, the biggest takeaway is all the skills that I've learned apart from research. Like, for example, working in a team, how to collaborate with people, how to talk to people, how do you convince people of your research? All these presentation skills, all these soft skills, all these other, in fact, life skills, I would say, like a lot of the things that we have learned here, like multitasking and all that. So I think all this can be put into action in multiple fields. You never know what you will like until you explore it. Let's see. It depends on the opportunities that are thrown at me.
Yeah. And I mean, just talking about in general with international students, there's always that some people want to stay here. Some people are wanting to go back immediately. Some people are wanting to go back eventually when they think like down the line. So it just varies from person to person. But I just think it's really just a good thing and a good life experience to experience different cultures in different places. And that's something that you've done, obviously, moving from India and coming here and then meeting people here from different countries. So what would you say that your big picture is when you look back at your experiences of being in India, then coming here, and now you're finishing your doctorate program? What is your overall takeaway?
I think, to me, the biggest learning or outcome of all my experiences is that just being open to everything and anything. Sometimes I think we close off ourselves too much that we don't even want to try a lot of stuff. But believe me or not, if you are open to experiencing new things every day, you can learn more than being closed off. Definitely, way more. I think, to me, being able to understand other people, other cultures, other people's perspectives has put me in the right place of a researcher. And, you have to have a humility to be able to do science in its best way. I think being open has taught me that. Like, you need to have an opinion. You also need to understand other people's opinion and see what you can do best of both. And of course, with my projects, I think just thinking about how people actually suffer in the front end of all these problems that we are working on, it tells you that you're working on something with a purpose. Definitely. I mean, it doesn't have to be like the entire building that you're building, right? It can be a brick, it can just be like a small stone or whatever. But you should definitely put in your 100% and then try to do whatever best for it. And also try to get 100% from the experience. Like, example, I met you in our first year. Let's say if I didn't talk to you, I wouldn't have a friend now, right? So I think being open, being humble, and also like learning the best of any experience is, I think, absolutely what I think the big picture is.
Yeah, and I really like that. And do you think, I just kind of want to follow up on that, do you think that your experience as a researcher and understanding people's opinions and then also like forming your own opinions and just basically sometimes having to fail before you can get it right, you're always trying new things before you come up with what you actually want to do or what the path that you want to take in research. So do you think that has kind of helped you out when you think about real life, like with people and relationships and just thinking about career and the future? What would you say about that?
Definitely. I think all these things that you and I mentioned about sums to something called decision making. And I think maybe I've improved in that process I'm in a good place to make decisions now than before. Maybe not the best, but better. So I think in terms of either relationships or friendships or like career-wise, you need to understand that you can only take so much into account while making a decision. But you should also understand that there are consequences to that decision making. It doesn't have to be good or bad as of now. It can be anything out of it, right? But also have that courage and reliance on yourself that you can face it. So decision making doesn't stop with making decisions alone. It also includes the aspect of responding to the repercussions of that decision making, or like it can be wonderful outcomes. You can either way. I think research as a whole has helped me, improve myself in the front of decision making. Definitely. What do you think?
Yeah, I really like that perspective of how it all comes down to decision making. I think so. I did my master's. It's 2 years, so definitely research. But I know that PhD is on a different scale for sure. So I just think in general, though, something I was thinking about as you were talking is how I kind of picture the world as a place that has a lot of different rooms and people, all kinds of people in each room. And I think that, you start off in one specific room, and then as life goes on, naturally there are certain rooms that you're going to move into. But I think sometimes, like, as you get to like your adult life, you can decide to just stay in that one room. I think, like, moving from child to like teenager to adult, you're naturally going to move to different rooms. But once you get to adult, you kind of make the decision of, am I going to open the door and experience other rooms, or kind of going to stay in the same room? So I would say we have to make that decision to, one, recognize that just because we're not in a certain room doesn't mean that that room doesn't exist. And then two, be brave enough or bold enough to see what's happening in other places. So that's kind of what I was thinking about as you were talking, of just knowing that, learning how to make decisions. But then also what I like that you said is learning how to respond to the outcome of those decisions, whether it's good or bad. And it sounds like research has kind of helped you do that, because I know that it's not a straightforward path. Like, you try this and then maybe you have like this certain hypothesis that it doesn't go that way, so you kind of switch gears. Like, just learning to adapt, which is just a helpful skill to have in life in general.
Definitely, you put it so well.
Yeah, so this was really good. Thank you for just coming on and being willing to share your experience. And I think that definitely really appreciate your friendship. I think we just always have conversations that help me, very thought-provoking, and help me think. So this was just another one of them. So is there anything else that you want to mention before we close out?
No, actually, I'm so glad to meet you again after a long time.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah, and as you said, I think we have had really, these valuable conversations, and I think I can remember a lot of it always. And then I think just being able to exchange what we know with each other, like we said, being open to each other's perspective helps us learn a lot. And I think every single time we have had a conversation like this, it's helped me definitely. I think it is very enriching, so I think we should have more of these.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like also like research and science is what brought us together. Otherwise it's like we're just from two different places, cultures, things like that, have a lot of different experiences, but then coming together, being at the same school and doing research, I think that we found that we do have things in common. And then even the things that we don't, like, we're able to be open with one another and share that. So yeah, I just really appreciate that. And thank y'all, everyone, for listening. I hope that y'all enjoyed this conversation. Let me know your thoughts. Make sure to follow the Big Picture Podcast on Instagram, leave a rating and review, and I will see y'all in the next episode.